Nothing prepares a mother for the chilling dread of a completely silent newborn. Little Leo had not uttered a single sound for 3 agonizing months. His eyelids remained permanently sealed shut. Specialists were baffled. But everything violently shifted the night. An enigmatic billionaire finally stepped into his isolated hospital room. Selina Hensley sat rigidly beside the neonatal incubator in room 422 of Seattle Presbyterian Medical Center, her posture stiff and defensive. Fluorescent lights buzzed mercilessly overhead, casting a sickly, pale glow across the sterile white walls. Her hands, trembling and stripped of their natural warmth, hovered just inches above the plexiglass barrier, separating her from her infant son. Little Leo lay perfectly still, swaddled in a pastel blue hospital blanket. He was breathtakingly beautiful, possessing skin like polished porcelain and thick dark hair that curled elegantly against his forehead. Yet he was utterly terrifying. Since the exact moment he was pulled from Selina's womb via an emergency cesarean section 92 days ago, Leo had not made a single sound. No wailing cries accompanied his birth, no soft coos or fussing whimpers followed. Most horrifying of all, his eyes had never opened. Dr. Benjamin Wright, the hospital's leading pediatric neurologist, stood near the doorway with a thick, ominous manila folder clutched to his chest. He cleared his throat, a sound that shattered the heavy stillness of the room. "Selina," Dr. Wright began, his voice laced with practiced clinical empathy. "We have run every conceivable diagnostic, whole exome sequencing, comprehensive metabolic panels, continuous EEG monitoring. The results are profoundly contradictory." Selina did not tear her gaze away from her son. "Define contradictory, doctor." "His core body temperature consistently hovers around 91 degrees Fahrenheit. Statistically, he should be in severe hypothermia, yet his tissue oxygenation is perfect. His resting heart rate is a staggering 28 beats per minute. When we attempt to introduce specialized infant formula through his feeding tube, his body violently rejects it. He is surviving purely on intravenous saline and the customized nutrient drip, but his cell regeneration is off the charts. It defies every known law of human biology." Selina finally turned her head, her exhausted, bloodshot eyes locking onto the doctor. "He is human, Dr. Wright. He is my son. I am not suggesting otherwise, Doctor." Wright sighed, running a hand through his graying hair. "But the ethics committee convened again this morning. Selina, you have to understand our position. Leo is completely unresponsive to auditory, visual, and tactile stimuli. He does not cry. He does not wake. He is, for all intents and purposes, in an idiopathic comatose state. The administration is pushing to transfer him to the Briarwood Palliative Care Facility. Keeping him in this intensive care unit is costing thousands of dollars a day, and frankly there is nothing more medical science can do for him here." "No." Selina's voice was a harsh, raspy whisper, but it carried the weight of absolute finality. "You are not moving him to a hospice. He is not dying. He's just waiting." Dr. Wright looked at her with profound pity before quietly exiting the room, leaving Selina to her solitary vigil. She leaned her forehead against the cool plastic of the incubator. Tears she thought she had long since exhausted began to prick the corners of her eyes. Her sister Samantha had echoed the doctor's sentiments just days prior, gently urging Selina to prepare for the inevitable. But Selina felt an undeniable magnetic pull toward her child. She knew deep within her very bones that Leo was fighting a battle no doctor could comprehend. Her mind drifted back to a rainy Tuesday in Portland, Oregon, exactly 1 year ago. She had been working as a restoration archivist at the Historical Society when a man walked into her dimly lit workspace. His name was Alexander Croft. He had been a breathtaking enigma, tall, impossibly graceful, and possessing an aura of ancient, terrifying authority that demanded immediate submission. His eyes were a striking, unnatural shade of obsidian, and his skin was perpetually cold to the touch. Their romance had not been a gentle courtship, it was a violent collision of souls. They spent 3 feverish, isolated weeks tangled together in his penthouse overlooking the Willamette River. He whispered promises in languages she did not understand, tracing the veins on her wrists with a hunger she found both intoxicating and alarming. Then, on the morning she planned to tell him she felt different, that her body was going through unexplainable, rapid changes, he vanished. The penthouse was suddenly empty, stripped of all furniture and personal belongings. Croft Industries, his massive holding company, liquidated its regional assets overnight. He left no note, no forwarding address, nothing but a ghost-like memory and a tiny, fluttering heartbeat taking root in Selina's womb. Selina had cursed his name through 9 grueling months of a brutal pregnancy that nearly drained the life out of her. She developed an intense aversion to sunlight, craved near-raw steaks, and suffered from crippling migraines. When Leo was born prematurely, wrapped in an unnatural chill and devastatingly silent, Selina knew instantly that Alexander had left her with a child that was only half human. A sudden, sharp drop in the hospital room's temperature violently yanked Selina from her memories. The digital thermometer on the wall plummeted from 72 to 58 degrees in mere seconds. The heavy oak door of room 412 clicked shut, the locking mechanism engaging with a loud, definitive snap. Selina stood up quickly, her chair scraping harshly against the linoleum floor. The overhead fluorescent bulbs flickered aggressively, buzzing like angry hornets before dying completely. The room was plunged into darkness, illuminated only by the frantic rhythmic blinking of Leo's life support monitors. Outside in the hallway, the chaotic sounds of a busy hospital ward abruptly ceased. No paging intercoms, no squeaking nurse shoes, no chatter. It was as if a massive, suffocating vacuum had descended over the entire floor. Then a deep, resonant voice drifted from the shadowed corner of the room. "You always were a remarkably stubborn woman, Selina." Selina's breath hitched in her throat, her lungs seizing as if plunged into ice water. She recognized that voice instantly. It had haunted her dreams and nightmares for 12 agonizing months. "Alexander," she breathed, her voice trembling violently. He stepped out of the shadows, and the ambient light from the street lamps outside illuminated his striking features. Alexander Croft looked exactly as he had the day he disappeared, untouched by time or stress. He wore a sharply tailored, midnight blue suit that clung perfectly to his broad shoulders. His dark hair was meticulously styled, but it was his eyes that paralyzed Selina. They were no longer obsidian. They were glowing with a faint, predatory crimson hue. "Stay away from us," Selina warned, stepping protectively in front of the incubator. She grabbed a heavy metal IV stand, her knuckles turning white as she hoisted it like a weapon. "You don't get to walk in here after abandoning me. You don't get to claim him now." Alexander did not flinch at the makeshift weapon. He moved with a terrifying, fluid grace, crossing the room before Selina could even track his movement. He stopped mere inches from the plexiglass barrier, his imposing frame dwarfing the medical equipment. "I did not abandon you by choice," Alexander spoke, his voice a low, rumbling baritone that vibrated through Selina's chest. "My sudden departure was a matter of survival. A violent insurrection arose within my ruling council in Eastern Europe. Assassins were dispatched to Portland. If I had stayed, if I had let them know you were my mate, they would have slaughtered you to hurt me. I had to sever the connection to protect you." Selina scoffed, hot tears spilling down her cheek. "Your mate? Insurrection? You sound completely insane, Alexander. You left me pregnant, alone, and terrified. Look at him." She pointed a trembling finger at the silent infant. "Look at what you did to him. The doctors think he's brain dead. He hasn't cried once. He hasn't opened his eyes." Alexander's gaze shifted to the baby. His expression, usually carved from cold marble, fractured slightly, revealing a flash of profound reverence. "Human doctors are entirely useless when it comes to royal blood," Alexander stated dismissively. "Royal blood?" Selina gripped the IV stand tighter. "I am the sovereign of the Nightfall Court, Selina. I am the Vampire King." He spoke the words not with arrogance, but with the weary weight of an ancient truth. "And this child, he is my heir. The first naturally born pureblood royal in over 6 centuries. Selina felt the room spin. The rational part of her brain, the archivist who dealt in facts and history, screamed at her to run, to hit the emergency call button. But the mother inside her, the woman who had survived an impossible pregnancy and stared at her inexplicably cold, silent baby, for 3 months knew he was telling the truth. It was the only terrifying explanation that fit. Alexander reached out, placing his large pale hand against the lid of the incubator. "He is not comatose, Selina. He is starving." "He gets specialized nutrients," Selina argued defensively. "They feed him through the tube. Human food is poison to his system. Even human milk would make him violently ill," Alexander explained, his glowing eyes fixed intensely on the tiny bundle. "He is operating in a state of deep hibernation, a biological defense mechanism to preserve his life force until he receives the sustenance his genetics demand. Before Selina could protest, Alexander effortlessly unlatched the heavy plastic hood of the incubator, tossing it aside as if it weighed nothing. The alarms instantly began to shriek, red lights flashing wildly as the sterile environment was breached. "Stop! You'll kill him!" Selina lunged forward, but an invisible, crushing pressure pinned her to the spot. She couldn't move her legs. She could only watch in sheer panic. Alexander reached into the crib and gently lifted the baby. He cradled Leo in one massive arm, supporting the infant's delicate neck. With his free hand, Alexander brought his own wrist to his mouth. Selina gasped in horror as he bit down hard on his own flesh. There was no blood, no messy spurts, only a thick, iridescent, dark ruby liquid that welled up perfectly at the puncture wound. "No, please," Selina sobbed, struggling against the invisible bind holding her. Alexander ignored her pleas. He gently pressed his bleeding wrist against the baby's pale, closed lips. For 10 agonizing seconds, nothing happened. The heart monitor continued its agonizingly slow beep, beep, beep. Then a sudden, violent shudder racked the baby's tiny frame. Little Leo's mouth parted. His small pink tongue darted out, tasting the ruby liquid. Instantly, his tiny hands, which had been balled into tight fists for 3 months, unfurled. He clammed his fingers fiercely onto Alexander's wrist, pulling it closer with a strength that defied his fragile appearance. The rhythmic beeping of the heart monitor violently accelerated. Beep, 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 beep. The machine wailed, unable to comprehend the sudden spike in the infant's vitals. His core temperature reading on the digital display rapidly climbed 92, 95, 98.6. Alexander pulled his wrist away. For the first time since his birth, little Leo moved his head on his own. He tilted it upward, tracking the heat and scent of the man holding him. And then the impossible happened. Leo's eyelashes fluttered. The sealed lids slowly peeled back. Selina stopped struggling, her breath catching in awe as she stared at her son's face. His eyes were not the soft hazel she had imagined. They were a brilliant, piercing, luminous crimson, mirroring his father's perfectly. Leo did not cry. Instead, he opened his mouth, revealing 2 tiny, razor-sharp ridges on his upper gums, and let out a sound that shattered the hospital's silence, a deep, resonant, predatory purr that vibrated through the entire room. Alexander looked up from his son, his crimson eyes locking onto Selina's terrified, awe-struck face. "The hibernation is over, Selina. Our son has awakened. And now we must leave this place before my enemies realize the true king has been born." Panic erupted outside the hospital room as the backup generators finally kicked in, bathing the corridors in a harsh, flashing amber light. The invisible, crushing pressure that had pinned Selina to the floor vanished in an instant. She scrambled forward, her knees slamming painfully against the cold linoleum, and reached frantically into the open incubator. Leo felt entirely different. The unnatural, terrifying chill that had plagued him since his premature birth was completely gone. His tiny body radiated a fierce, astonishing heat, mimicking the warmth of a sun-baked stone. He looked up at Selina, his newly opened, crimson eyes tracking her face with an intelligence that was profoundly unsettling for a 3-month-old infant. He did not cry. He merely stared, his small fingers still curled tightly into the fabric of Alexander's expensive suit jacket. "We have less than 3 minutes before the hospital's automated lockdown engages," Alexander stated, his voice devoid of panic but vibrating with absolute authority. He smoothly draped a heavy black cashmere coat over Selina's shoulders, shielding both her and the baby. "Hold him tightly against your chest. Do not let go, and do not look back." Selina had 1,000 questions, a million screaming demands for rational explanations, but the primal, maternal instinct to protect her newly awakened child overrode them all. She clutched Leo securely, wrapping the oversized coat around his fragile form. Alexander kicked the heavy oak door of room 422. He did not merely push it, he struck it with a devastating, localized force that ripped the steel hinges straight out of the reinforced drywall. The door crashed into the hallway with a deafening boom. Nurses and security guards were running frantically toward them, armed with nothing but flashlights and walkie-talkies. Alexander did not harm them. He merely raised his left hand, his crimson eyes flaring brighter. A wave of concussive, invisible energy rippled down the corridor. The hospital staff instantly collapsed against the walls, not dead but forced into a sudden deep unconsciousness. "Keep moving," Alexander instructed, his hand firmly gripping the small of Selina's back, propelling her toward the emergency stairwell. They descended 4 flights of concrete stairs in a matter of seconds. Alexander practically carried Selina, his movements a blur of terrifying, supernatural speed that left her completely disoriented. When they burst through the ground floor exit doors, the freezing Seattle rain instantly soaked Selina's hair. A sleek, heavily armored black SUV idled aggressively at the curb, its engine producing a deep, guttural growl. A mountain of a man stepped out at the driver's side. He wore tactical gear over a tailored suit, his face scarred and his jaw set like granite. "My king," the man rumbled, bowing his head in profound respect before throwing open the rear passenger door. "Get in, Selina. This is Dominic, my underboss," Alexander ordered, ushering her into the cavernous, leather-scented interior of the vehicle. Alexander slid in beside her, pulling the heavy door shut, just as the wail of approaching police sirens pierced the night air. Dominic gunned the engine, and the SUV launched forward with neck-snapping acceleration, seamlessly disappearing into the chaotic, rain-slicked traffic of the metropolitan grid. Selina sat trembling in the back seat, the adrenaline crash hitting her system like a physical blow. She looked down at Leo. The infant was nestled against her chest, perfectly content, his glowing eyes studying the passing streetlights with serene curiosity. "You called him your underboss," Selina managed to whisper, her voice trembling as she looked at Alexander. "You said you were a king, but you run this like a syndicate." Alexander leaned back against the leather seat, his eyes dimming slightly from their aggressive crimson to a dark, dangerous maroon. "The mortal world romanticizes our kind, Selina. They write poetry about lonely aristocrats in haunted castles. The reality is far more brutal and far more organized. The Nightfall Court operates on a strict, global hierarchy. We are the architects of the shadows. We control central banks, private military contractors, and global logistics networks. It is a family ruled by blood, loyalty, and absolute violence. And for the last year, my family has been bleeding." "The insurrection you mentioned," Selina said, her archivist brain desperately piecing together the fragmented information. "Orchestrated by a man named Alistair Corvin, the head of the oldest rival family within the High Council," Alexander explained, his jaw clenching with lethal fury. "Corvin grew greedy. He believed my refusal to exploit mortal financial markets for short-term supernatural gain was a sign of weakness. He rallied the European capos against me. But vampires rarely fight their own wars directly anymore. Corvin hired outside muscle to execute the coup." Selina asked, clutching Leo tighter. "The Lycaon cartel," Dominic answered from the driver's seat, his deep voice carrying a note of profound disgust. "Werewolves, ma'am, specifically, a brutal mercenary faction led by an alpha named Griffinholt. They are untamed, visceral, and practically immune to our standard political manipulations." Alexander reached over, his cold, powerful fingers gently brushing a damp strand of hair from Selina's face. "When I discovered the hit had been ordered, their assassins were already in Portland. If I had stayed to fight them off while protecting a pregnant, fragile human mate, I would have made a critical error. So I vanished. But I did not cower, Selina. I spent the last 12 months executing the most ruthless professional retribution our world has ever witnessed." Selina looked at him, realizing the depth of the man, the monster she had fallen in love with. "I froze Corvin's legitimate assets," Alexander continued, a dark, predatory smirk playing on his lips. "I manipulated international trade laws to bankrupt their shell companies. I leaked their private shipping manifests to human federal agencies, causing the FBI and Interpol to seize billions of dollars in syndicate contraband. I starved them financially, turning Corvin's allies against him as their wealth evaporated. I dismantled his empire from the inside out. Now Corvin is desperate, cornered, and bankrupt. He thinks he has won because I have been absent from the throne. He is horribly mistaken. The SUV navigated onto the floating bridge, heading toward the exclusive secluded estates of Mercer Island. The rain continued to hammer against the bulletproof glass, creating a sense of suffocating isolation. They don't know about Leo, Selina realized, a cold spike of fresh terror piercing her heart. If they find out you have an heir, They will throw every beast they have at us to slaughter him, Alexander finished, his eyes blazing crimson once more. A pureblood royal heir stabilizes my claim to the throne, absolutely. It nullifies Corvin's entire political argument. That is why Leo was hiding Selena. His biology suppressed his royal aura, keeping him silent, keeping him cold, so the cartel's scouts could not sniff out his existence. But now that he is fed, now that his eyes are open, his presence is a beacon in the supernatural world. The vehicle turned off the main highway, winding down a private, densely forested road, before pulling up to massive wrought-iron security gates. Dominic pressed a code into the console, and the gate swung open, revealing a sprawling, ultra-modern fortress of glass, steel, and concrete, perched on the edge of Lake Washington. "Welcome to the sanctuary," Alexander said, helping Selena out of the vehicle. "You will be safe here. The perimeter is fortified with lethal countermeasures, and my most loyal soldiers guard the grounds." Inside the estate, the atmosphere was tense and meticulously controlled. Armed guards in sleek dark suits patrolled the sweeping corridors. Selena was escorted to a massive reinforced master suite overlooking the stormy lake. Alexander brought her a heavy, silver chalice filled with warm, spiced broth, ordering her to drink and rebuild her strength. For the first time in a year, Selena felt a bizarre sense of peace. Little Leo, having consumed his father's blood, was completely transformed. He was robust, active, and surprisingly strong. When Selena laid him on the massive king-sized bed, he rolled over immediately, his crimson eyes locking onto hers with a profound, terrifyingly mature gaze. He reached out, his tiny fingers grasping the silver chain of the necklace Selena always wore. Alexander stood by the floor-to-ceiling reinforced window, his posture rigid, staring out into the tempestuous night. The storm outside was worsening, the wind howling violently against the glass. "He is magnificent," Alexander murmured, his back still turned to the room. "He has your resilience, Selena. A lesser human would not have survived carrying him to term." "He needs a father, Alexander," Selena said softly, stepping up behind him. "Not just a king, not just a mob boss." "Oh." Alexander turned, his expression softening as he looked at the woman who anchored his chaotic existence. He reached out, pulling her flush against his chest. His body was cold, but the emotional heat radiating from him was overwhelming. "He will have everything. When this night is over, the Nightfall Court will recognize their queen, and the enemies of our family will be erased from history." Suddenly, the massive estate shuddered violently. The low, rhythmic hum of the ambient lighting instantly cut to a glaring, emergency red. A deafening klaxon alarm began to wail through the corridors. Alexander's head snapped up, his jaw tightening into a lethal snarl. "Dominic!" he roared, his voice projecting with supernatural volume that rattled the heavy wooden doors. The bedroom door flew open, and Dominic rushed in, clutching a heavy, modified tactical rifle. "Perimeter breach, my king. The western wall has been compromised. It's the Lycaon cartel, dozens of them. They bypassed the thermal sensors." "How?" Selena panicked, rushing to the bed and snatching Leo up into her arms. "They didn't bypass them," Alexander realized, his eyes burning like twin suns. "They brought enough bodies to overwhelm the automated defenses. Corvin knows I am here. He is making his final desperate play." A horrific, bone-chilling howl erupted from the lower levels of the estate. It was a sound of pure, unadulterated primal violence, the sound of massive, unnatural wolves tearing through reinforced steel and armed guards. "Get them to the vault," Alexander commanded Dominic. "Lock it down. If anyone but me attempts to open that door, you execute them." "No." Selena grabbed Alexander's arm. "You can't leave us again." Alexander cupped her face in his hands, his thumbs aggressively wiping away the fresh tears spilling down her cheeks. "I am not leaving you, Selena. I am defending my territory. I am exterminating the pests who dare to threaten my queen." Before Selena could protest further, Alexander vanished. He didn't run, he simply ceased to be in the room, moving at a velocity that defied human comprehension. Dominic grabbed Selena by the arm, dragging her and the baby toward a concealed panel behind the massive oak bookshelf. The walls slid away, revealing a claustrophobic titanium-reinforced panic room. They rushed inside, and the heavy vault door sealed shut with a deafening hydraulic hiss, plunging them into absolute, terrifying silence. For 20 agonizing minutes, Talina sat on the cold metal floor, clutching her silent, glowing-eyed son. She could feel the violent vibrations reverberating through the thick walls. The estate was being torn apart. Muffled gunshots, visceral roars, and the sickening sounds of crushing bone echoed through the concrete. Then the vibration stopped. The silence that followed was suffocating. Selina exchanged a terrified glance with Dominic, who kept his rifle trained unwaveringly on the sealed door. A loud, heavy thud struck the exterior of the vault. Then another. Slowly, agonizingly, the heavy hydraulic locks began to disengage. The massive metal door creaked open, revealing the devastated ruins of the master bedroom. Standing in the doorway was Alexander. His immaculate suit was shredded, heavily stained with dark, viscous blood that was not his own. His breathing was heavy and his hands were coated in gore up to his elbows. He looked like an ancient, wrathful god of war. In his right hand, he dragged the massive, unconscious, half-shifted body of Griffin Holt, the alpha of the Lycaon cartel. The monstrous werewolf was severely broken, his jaw shattered and his massive limbs twisted at unnatural angles. With his left hand, Alexander gripped the throat of a perfectly manicured, terrified older man in a bespoke grey suit. Alexander hurled Griffin's broken body onto the floor of the bedroom, then viciously threw the older man to his knees right in front of the open vault door. "Selina," Alexander said, his voice a dark, terrifying purr that demanded absolute submission. "I would like you to meet Alistair Corvin, the architect of my temporary exile." Corvin gasped for air, his eyes wide with profound, paralyzing fear. He looked up at Alexander, then his gaze shifted into the vault. When Corvin's eyes landed on Selina, and more importantly, on the infant in her arms with the glowing crimson eyes of pure royal lineage, the older vampire visibly completely broke. "Impossible," Corvin whispered, his voice cracking with absolute despair. "The bloodline was stagnant, a pure blood. It cannot be. You sought to bankrupt my legacy, Alistair," Alexander sneered, towering over the defeated rival boss. "You utilized filthy, feral dogs to usurp a throne you were too cowardly to claim yourself. You attempted to murder my mate and my son." Alexander stepped forward, placing one heavy polished shoe squarely on the back of Corvin's neck, pinning the rival boss face down against the blood-soaked carpet. "Your corporate assets are liquidated. Your shell companies belong to Croft Industries. Your European capos have already sworn allegiance to me in exchange for their pathetic lives," Alexander stated, delivering the final, crushing blow of professional retribution. "You have nothing left, Alistair. You die a bankrupt traitor in the presence of your true king." Alexander did not hesitate. With a sickening, sharp twist of his heel, he shattered Corvin's spine, ending the insurrection permanently. Dominic immediately lowered his rifle, dropping to one knee amidst the carnage, bowing his head to his undisputed sovereign. Alexander stepped over the bodies, his violent demeanor instantly dissolving as he approached Selina. He reached into the vault, gently taking his son from her trembling arms. Little Leo immediately grabbed a fistful of his father's blood-stained shirt, entirely unbothered by the violence, letting out another deep, satisfied purr. Alexander offered his free hand to Selina. "The war is over, Selina," Alexander promised, pulling her up from the cold floor and out into the ruined room. "The throne is secure. The syndicate is ours." Selina looked at the destruction around her, then up at the terrifying, beautiful monster who loved her, and the supernatural son they had created. She didn't flinch away from the blood or the chaos. Instead, she laced her fingers tightly through Alexander's, stepping out of the shadows and into her new reality. She was no longer just a human archivist. She was the queen of the Nightfall Court, and heaven help anyone who ever tried to threaten her family again. If you were captivated by Selina and Alexander's dark, high-stakes journey and want more thrilling supernatural drama, smash that like button. Don't forget to share this story with your fellow dark romance lovers, and subscribe to the channel so you never miss out on our next immersive, pulse-pounding tale. Drop a comment below telling us your favorite twist, and turn on notifications for more.